Sometimes people ask me, what are you actually talking about? What are you in fact doing? What is the point that you're trying to make? The purpose, the motivation behind these videos? Well, to explain it, apart from discussing the topics that I publish and that I try to develop further in discussing them, to look more into them, to explain them more in detail, and to highlight their mutual relations. What I'm trying is to mainly identify, name, and explain the general or main structural features or key points, cornerstones, if we wish, of the whole topic, and how these are related or related mutually or interrelated in terms of how the text comes into being and is how it is perceived. So to map the whole structure, the whole system that is there behind the text creation, it's coming into being, and it's being perceived. The main points, the main pillars, this whole structure relies upon, and how these are interrelated, interdependent, and together creating this whole structure. In concrete terms, or in terms of what refers to the theory and theorists and the streams of thinking I'm working with, it's mainly, as I've mentioned already elsewhere, the functionalism in anthropology, the formalists, the Russian formalist school, the structuralists, and also the Americans, say, if we can sum it up this way, like socio linguists, sociologists, social behavioralists, that shaped the face of the, let's say, American or global communication theory from the 1940s, roughly, of 1950s till 1990s. Obviously, we can include into them two separate lines that are, let's say, paved by, on the one hand, by Anna Wierzbicka and her studies into the linguistic or language universals, among others, and George Lakoff and his studies into metaphors and figurative meanings. Of course, we have also language or literature theorists such as Wolfgang Iser, Hans Robert Jauss, and also other sociolinguists or social behavior theorists like the already mentioned Paul Grice and Judee Burgoon. Also, because in many instances, I use art as the explanatory means, or as a tool to explain some relations and ways or mechanisms, principles that are there whenever text perception is the case. I also use the linguistic theory, or the theory of language, or the expressions or principles that are named and rooted in the language, or primarily because of the phenomenon is present in the language, or was identified in linguistics and then named in the field of linguistics, but which I apply also to the interaction of communication in general, including obviously the art. So there I mainly refer to Ernst Gombrich, the originally Austrian and Britain-based art theorist, as well as Nelson Goodman. We may also say art theorist or logician that formulated many or most of his thesis in reference to art, codes or languages, and their perception. Art as such serves to me as the source of multiple other examples. Mostly it's obviously paintings, because it's paintings in my understanding that highlights or reflect well the points that I'm trying to make, such as for example, the loadedness of the message, some balance between, let's say, content, not only content and form, but generally when it comes to the message that is supposed to be gotten across to the spectator or recipient. Obviously structure, how the texts are structured, not only the clearly linear texts, such as movies or books that come into being temporarily in time, but also those who are seemingly immediate, as I've explained elsewhere, as well as paintings or statues. Obviously, the Gestalt theory that I mostly operationalize in terms or use to explain something that I understand as the basic structure, the minimal necessary set of structurally interrelated points or inputs that are able to give the recipient or perceiver of them the information that object or constellation configuration he is looking at or he is perceiving is what the author intended to really it to be. So there is a minimal set of them that I would basically liken or equal to Gestalt. The already mentioned implicature, and all implicitly, with all the implicitly deduced items, parts, the values of the text, and so on. So this is just a brief overview of the materials or inspiration that I'm working with. Of course, there's more to it. I've just mentioned some of the main contributors, authors, and thinkers. Anyway, back to the question. So back to the main question or topic I started with. So whenever somebody asks me, "Are you a linguist or something?" then well, despite myself finding a great joy in languages, not only on this let's say big or macro level, but also on the micro one, like passively when it comes to phonetics, actively grammar, syntax, stylistics, different languages, mostly living one. I always have to say, despite all this, well, in the traditional strict sense of who linguists are, then definitely not. But in terms of how language, any communication code, how this reflects the world, thanks to this, or based on this, with the understanding of this, that language is there to reflect the world, and how it does it, there is, in my understanding, no way of bypassing language or linguistics whenever communication or communication theory and text perception analysis is the case. Because what happens actually is that I consider not only language and linguistics, but the terminology that comes along with them, not only good for the language itself, but in many cases also very well fit, apt and applicable back on the reality as such. That means the terms, the expressions, the terminology that is there intended to explain the language, implicitly, indirectly, in most cases, also explains the world and the communication, the relations that are there in communication and in interaction as it is, because simply language reflects the world. So logically, whatever is there to describe the how language works, how linguistics or language is made, will logically refer to how the world and the interactions in it are as well. So the language, linguistics, and its terminology is, in my opinion, one of the great sources of understanding not only the language but also the world and the communication, interaction, relations in it as well, in the reality and the processes that happen or take place in there in terms of the human interaction or communication. Structurally, I mean, to explain it even more clearly, for example, any paradigm has its structural key points or cornerstone. So to liken it to another thing, imagine, for example, that you're about to set up a business project or whatever project that requires cooperation, coordination of more players, more disciplines. So beside other things, such as the capital and the idea and so on, you need one key thing, and that is the identification of the key points of these intersections, of these vital pillars, for which you, for example, appoint the employees or the people who are in charge to deliver and to oversee or supervise these key points. And as long as you identify them well, as long as you identify these interfaces or these intersections well, your project is and you've chosen obviously the right persons for these roles, then your project is very likely to succeed. Contrary to that, or in contrast to that, if you fail in exactly identifying the cornerstones or the pillars, or you haven't hit precisely the responsibilities, or named or identified the responsibility, the set of responsibilities of each person in charge, and there are these undesired overlaps because this or that hasn't been clearly cleared out, clarified, or devised upon that person according to what the reality requires from this or that role, then most likely things will not go exactly the way that you would like them to have, or they will not be as smooth or seamless as it have been the case had you identified these areas of activity or responsibility precisely as they should be according to what reality is. This is what language and linguistics obviously did, as well as some other disciplines, many disciplines, which means language did it, or linguistics, because it reflects the world, reflects the phenomena, the key and strong points that are there cooperatively in their interaction, serving the common goal, common whole, or supporting the whole structure and helping it go ahead. And that is why I think the terminology related to both language or linguistics have the potential to describe much more than just themselves, than just this discipline, are particularly suitable for describing also some other realities that simply because both the realities and the language are or linguistics are reflected in the terminology used in it. For example, another example of this good description of this coordination, distribution of responsibilities or main tendencies, principles that work together, and the identification of which helps us better understand how this or that structure works, besides linguistics or language, is this taxonomy, so to say, of a reality, is the division, the identification and description of communication process main points that Judee Burgoon actually made in her research into expectancy violation in 1976 and 1978, describing all the main participants, all the main factors that actually, in my opinion, very convincingly, very successfully, are the main points, main actors, cornerstones, pillars of this whole communication, in this case expectancy, non-violation, or violation process. And obviously, since we're always referring to only one communication reality, there are qualitatively different ones of them, or quantitatively different ones of them. They seem to be different, but qualitatively, in their essence, it's always one communication situation or type of interaction that we're referring to, no matter how different it looks in different cultures, communities, or situations. There are always expectations, and they're non-violation, violation that the recipient and also author are entering the communication or interaction process with. So based on this, or in reference to this, I think her description was very, very exact. The identification, she succeeded very much in identifying all the key elements and factors that take part in this process. And that's why not only the linguistics or language theory or literature theory is particularly suitable for this, but the inspiration, the clarification of the whole picture can be found also elsewhere, symptomatically in the socio-behavioral theory studies and so on. But elsewhere too, for example, take law, judiciary, judicial proceeding, legal terminology, and so on. Also, this excels in precisely describing these or that situation, point of view, motives, and different expectations, qualities, experience, this or that motives. Again, this or that actor enters the deed, the act with, and how it is reflected, or what role it plays in the context of the whole, including, of course, the criminology or later on, let's say trial, legal cases, and so on. This all has its more or less exact categories, very refinedly, precisely categorized, taxonomical order, or situations, almost each of which has its more or less exact terminologic denomination, or simply term or name. And that again is another very broadly described motivation or explanation of the main motivation that I'm doing actually these videos for, and the theoretical work or research. To cut a long story short, to sum it up, to explain it briefly, like, what I'm after is the identification of the taxonomy, that, or a set of terms that will render, in the ideal case, that will render a convincingly trustworthy picture or structure model of how the main processes are in the text perception, interaction between the author and the text recipient, mostly in terms of the text perception. The main processes are what their main cornerstones or pillars are, and what the relations, mutual relations are, specifically when the not only text production, but mostly the text perception is the case.